Hey, everybody, welcome to this new episode. I want to thank you all for joining and taking the time out of your day to watch this episode. This episode is with Colonel Towner-Watkins. It is a wonderful episode. Due to technical difficulties, we lost about an hour of footage from the software. So it is my apology about that. But we do have about an hour and 20 minutes of footage that is pretty amazing. And so hopefully you guys like it. Don't forget to leave a comment. And also, it's good to see you guys again. Still fighting off a cold. I mean, like, I'm almost out of it, still sniffling and stuff. So, but anyways, hope you all are well. Thanks again for watching and enjoy the episode.
Where history's shadows cast long, unsettling doubts, the truth lies buried. From cryptic wartime codes to assassinations that scarred generations, unearth the secrets the world tried to forget. Hosts Tim Gardner and Eli Frame guide you through a labyrinth of unanswered questions, where every clue pulses with danger and intrigue, and perhaps an opinion or two. It's not all facts because history never is. Welcome to the Ciphered Past.
Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Ciphered Past, episode 39. It's great to be back. I had the back-to-back thing happen with me with sickness. I think it was COVID, and then I think it was a bacterial infection. I'm glad to be back, glad to be healthy, glad to get my sense of smell back. Eli, how are you, my man?
I'm doing well compared to you. I'm glad to see you back and up.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, it was about, I mean, like, we're talking 2.5 weeks, so... I think I got it from my son, who's a first grader. He's 6, and brought it home, and I just been going through it, and thankfully, still have a little bit of nasal issues, but yeah, man, I feel a lot better. So it's really good to be back. And tonight's show is going to be absolutely fascinating. We are very excited for our guest, and we're looking forward to it. But so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read a bio, short bio at that, and we'll introduce our guest. So tonight's guest that we have on the show is Colonel Roxanne Towner-Watkins. She's retired from 30 years Air Force Colonel, real estate investor. She's a gardening enthusiast. She's done Black Ops Radio. She's on X at Colonel Towner. She's a force on the social media platform, and we are so grateful to have her on. Colonel Towner, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to actually, I mean, for Colonel's audience, we also thank you for watching our show for the very first time too. It's a pleasure to have the Colonel on. So, Colonel, really broad guests. Just give our guests a little bit of a background about yourself, and of course, your mission with Operation Gladio.
Okay, so like you said, I spent 30 years in the military. My whole reason for going in the military was to get a college education, and I enlisted right out of high school, and I over the 30 years, I spent the preponderance of my adult life in college classes. I have 6 different degrees, from aircraft maintenance, which is what I initially did when I was on active duty, to construction management for my real estate company that my husband and I started. And I have an MBA. I have a strategic studies from Air War College, the 2 different masters that I have. And so again, I've had lots of history brought to me from the university system. And I'm an avid reader. I spend basically all of my hobby time doing reading, and I've always read nonfiction. So I had this collection of information that kind of rattled around in my head over the years. And I thought I had a fairly good context of how the world operated. And about 3.5 years ago, I ran across a series of books that kind of rocked my world. It painted a picture that this group of people, I call it the International Syndicate, had basically plotted the Bolshevik Revolution, funded it, housed Trotsky in New York and Lenin in London, and then basically unleashed them on the Russian people. And also, that was Antony Sutton's book. He wrote 3 books. He also wrote a book about how this same group of people funded Hitler's rise to power. And then he talked about the same people funding FDR, and just in time for World War II. That led me to do a little bit of research on the Fabian Society in the late 1800s and how they had this master one world government plan. And that was actually their words in the 1800s, that they were going to have 3 world wars, and it was called gradualism. And they were going to use a thing called the strategy of tension. And the strategy of tension basically says that you create basically a Hegelian dialect. You create a polar left and you create a polar right, and then you just pit those forces against each other, and terrorist activities and all kinds of things like that, wars, famines, and it scares the living daylights out of people. And anybody that is emotionally traumatized is easy to control. And again, I have training in psychological operations and stuff like that. And this just so resonated with me. I'm like, holy crap, that like redefines the entire world as we know it. And so in one of the books, I was reading about a concept called the third way. And that's basically the shuttling of people into this mass, I envision it like prodding us from the left and right through terrorist activities into getting on the cattle train to our own death. That's basically the nuts and bolts of it. In one of those books, I heard the mention of a new term, and it was done in a military context. And again, I know a lot about military history. And it was called the stay behind units, and I'd never heard that term. So immediately, I'm one of those people that's like a dog with a bone. So I wanted to look up what a stay behind unit is, because again, it's military-ish, and I had never heard of it. So it was like falling into this massive rabbit hole. So when I started researching the origins of the stay behind units, you come to World War II and the OSS and the Nazis. And the Nazis had seeded stay behind units under the concept of every piece of territory we take, whether it's France or Romania or Hungary or into Russia, Ukraine, we're going to plant caches of weapons, and we're going to train basically terrorist assassins. And if we get pushed back, that they would pop up behind, like on the Eastern Front, the Russians, in order to attack them from behind. So, okay, that's a great wartime concept. I'd never heard of it. And so that was very odd to me. I'm like, well, that sounds like a really interesting strategic tactic, right? Or a tactic to use to achieve a strategic effect. And I'm like, well, why didn't they teach that in Air War College when we're reading all about history of warfare? Because that seems like a pretty big deal. Well, I found out that the reason why they don't teach that is because under NATO, which basically, well, first of all, Operation Sunrise happens at the end of World War II. Operation Sunrise had, on the American side that we can verify, a Major General Lyman Lemnitzer sitting beside Allen Dulles at a negotiating table across from General Wolf, and the stay-behind units under Hitler was called Werewolf units after General Wolf. And Reinhard Gehlen, who we know goes on to be the Gehlen organization, counterpart to the CIA, blah, 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 was the Eastern Front stay-behind guy. And Otto Skorzeny, the Nazi, was his chief trainer on the Eastern Front for Reinhard Gehlen. And so General Wolf's sitting at a table, they're negotiating basically what the aftermath, because they know they're going to lose at this point. They're in northern Italy, very important. And General Wolf tells Allen Dulles, hey, I've had this entire network of buried weapons and trained assassins / terrorists with explosives, guns, everything. And I'll turn this network over to you and all of the captured Russian documents that we have buried if you'll rat line us out of here. If you set up special camps for us, we'll give you whatever information we have, and then you secure our safety. And that was Operation Sunrise. So I was like, holy crap, I didn't learn about that either. And so you understand then Allen Dulles becomes Eisenhower. Now, Eisenhower is the theater commander for the Allies, right? In all of Europe. Eisenhower's in on all of this. He knows all about this deal. Lyman Lemnitzer is his chief logistics officer on his staff. So the first job that Eisenhower has is basically the NATO commander in the aftermath of the war. And then, of course, the Rockefellers and the Dulles brothers convince him to run as a Republican and becomes president. So the guy that set up the architect of the stay-behind units in Europe under NATO's guise is now our president, right? So that's all very, very important. Guess who Eisenhower makes his chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that JFK inherits? Lyman Lemnitzer. Okay, so he's now a 4-star general. And Lyman Lemnitzer is the one that orchestrated the changing out of all of these stay-behind units all over Europe with NATO-compatible weapons. There was an effort called very highly classified. From 1945 until 2014, this operation I'm about to tell you about was classified. It was not declassified until 2014. So they set up a thing called Detachment A's, the alphabet A. And Detachment A was the precursor to what we know as Special Forces today, ODAs, A teams, all of that stuff. Detachment Alpha in Europe, one of their tasks was to go to all of these stay-behind caches, set up concertina wire around them, pitch tents and make it look like a military compound. Under the tents, they dug up all of the weapon caches, took all of the Nazi ammunition, guns, explosives, and replaced all of them with NATO-compatible weapons and moved to the next location. This went on for several years, doing this all over Europe because they were everywhere. So if you stay on the Gladio only track, what happens is they were justified in, it's ran out of NATO. There was 2 organizations. It's called the Allied Clandestine Committee and the Clandestine Planning Committee, CPC and ACC. You can find those referenced in Danielle Ganser's book, NATO Secret Army. So they had meetings at NATO headquarters on how to use these trained assassins and basically criminals, terrorists. And they were billed as anti-communist. You know, we're going to set all of these up and take them over just in case the Russian army or the Soviet army that had just lost 25 million people run across the Volga Gap tomorrow. There was no threat. They were devastated. Their industry was destroyed. But so then you have to ask yourself, well, why did they really set them up? Well, the history shows us clearly the only use of these stay-behind units, which are generically called Operation Gladio, is to commit domestic terror events and deploy these trained assassins all over the world to kill people, to destabilize governments. And they did it. They staged terror attacks. The only one that we know all of the history of is Italy, which is why it's generically called Operation Gladio, because that was the name of their program. But like in Turkey, it was called the Grey Wolves. In France, it was called OAS. So every one of them, in Portugal, it was called Agenter Press. Every one of them had kind of like a code name for it. But they were in every NATO country. And according to Daniel Ganser, you had to sign a secret document to even be in NATO, that you would set up your own stay-behind units. So of course, I'm sitting here reading, I'm like a year into this. I've read like 50 books I now have read 150 books on this. But at the time, I basically devoured about 50 books. And I'm like, one day, just out of the blue, I'm like, oh shit, we're in NATO. Where's our stay-behind units? If everybody was required to have them, who's ours? Where are they? And so then I started going back and doing research on domestic terror events in the United States. And it was shocking, because one of the first ones that comes up is the Cuban exiles, right? Directly related to everything JFK. Cuban exiles were utilized by the United States CIA as our stay-behinds. They committed domestic terror events in the United States. We all know that they were involved, whether they were trigger pullers, but they were definitely involved in the JFK assassination. They were involved in RFK's assassination. They were involved in bombing aircraft out of Miami. They were the drug runners for the CIA of the narcotics coming in through the port of Miami. So they have been under the command and control. You find Cuban exiles in Angola. You find them in El Salvador. I mean, Felix Rodriguez, the guy that Tucker interviewed like a year ago, Brigade 2506, the overthrow of Fidel Castro, in Guatemala, in a lot of the different operations done in Latin America as part of Operation Condor, you're going to find Cuban exiles. Just about every CIA operation post 1958, 59, when Castro's revolution happened, has Cuban exiles associated. Vietnam, a ton of them was in Vietnam. So I'm like just blown away. They actually detonated a car bomb in Washington, D.C. and killed Ambassador Lettier from Chile. They were involved in Watergate. So again, you just see them over and over in all kinds of destabilization and assassinations. And I'm like, oh, holy shit, this is like blowing my mind. So if you go back to Lyman
what's interesting, Colonel?
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize. When you started the interview out talking about Alan Dulles, I mean, that alone right there is just like, this guy and his brother John Foster seem to be connected to a lot of things throughout history, right? So I think it's interesting that this guy, I mean, with where he was positioned, like what you were talking about. And by the way, thank you for that. That was absolutely fascinating. I had no idea about his positioning in that. But the fact is that with Dulles, you see circumstances like that there's a full like stem from him specifically through all these things, whether it be, we're talking Lumumba, we're talking all these other world leaders that were assassinated. He's had his hands dirty on this whole thing the whole time.
Yes, he has a lot of dead bodies around him. And if we're doing this book called Safe for Democracy right now by John Prados, and Eisenhower repeatedly says that he could not fire Alan Dulles. There were several people around him that questioned things, like Alan Dulles wasn't completely forthright with him several times. Alan Dulles, and this is a concept most people will have difficulty wrapping their head around. The CIA has never worked for the American government, ever. From the day it was created with the bankers and lawyers from the OSS, and they worked for the International Syndicate. If you have a resource in a country like the Congo, you mentioned Patrice Lumumba, they had uranium. The United States was buying 100% of the Belgian mined uranium out of the Congo. Patrice Lumumba traveled to the United States and said, after they were granted their freedom from being a slave state of Belgium, he said, I have no problem selling you 100% of the uranium. I have a problem with Belgium still getting a cut because we're not a colony anymore. And I want to deal directly with you. Eisenhower told him to pound sand, wouldn't meet with him. Nixon, the vice president, told him to pound sand, wouldn't meet with him. I tend not to, my closest military friends, I tend not to talk too much about this. Like, my best friend's a retired colonel as well, and her and I talk about it. We get together for lunch once a month. She's retired over in Tampa. And so, but most of them don't want to hear, because the military's been intimately involved in all of this. You have a lot of the general officers, that served in the CIA, that were affiliated with the CIA, blah, blah, blah. A lot of them don't want their illusion of the career that they had spoiled by reality, unfortunately. And so there's that. I just want to know the truth. I don't care what the truth is. I spent a lot of time fighting corruption when I was on active duty and trying to take care of people. And so I've just always been the person, I do things the right way, no matter what the cost. And so there's a lot of people, we find that in older generations too, where, like my husband's parent, when somebody will be asking me a question and she's like, oh, I just don't want to hear that, because they grew up in an America that they want to continue thinking the America is the America they grew up in. And I understand that. I just don't want to grow up in a country that lies to me. And if my government has lied to me, I want everybody to know that it was a lie, and I want it to stop. And we have entire institutions that were set up to do nothing but lie to us. And the CIA is one of them.
Right.
So when you look at Truman, okay, we're starting now, but Truman. So basically, when you talk about like how we are getting a lack of transparency with like our government, and Truman himself, he's another one like Eisenhower. He came out, basically saying that the CIA should be, dissolved, just like Kennedy did. Your thoughts on Truman, because Truman was heavily influential post OSS to CIA to this whole, conglomerate, what we see right now in the shadow government.
Truman used these operations. He knew all about Operation Gladio. He knew about the stay behind units. He used them during his presidency. So I don't find any presidents that really had a problem with any of this. They said they did, but they used them. And he is the one that wrote the National Security Action Memorandum 4512-2, which authorized the use, illegally, by the way, it's not authorized in the legislation at all, and other activities associated that authorized covert action. And that was never the purpose of the CIA. The CIA was set up specifically to gather intelligence, and that they create intelligence to justify the covert action. They don't collect intelligence. They never have.
I think
I don't give any of them a pass.
Yeah. Well, that's the safe way to go, I think. Um, now, I believe it was the 112th or the fourth. I think it was the 112th military intelligence that called the DPD or the FBI on November 22nd and said, we have a file on Lee Harvey Oswald and we have a file on Alec Heidel. And I believe that was the initial insertion of that name into the record that we have on what was pinned on Lee Harvey Oswald through the Alec Heidel, which ties him to the rifle and to the pistol and everything else. So that was another touch point that I thought of in the last few minutes regarding, I believe it was the 112th. And you said they were based in Texas or in Dallas itself?
I didn't get the last part of that. I'm sorry, you cut out.
I said the 112th is based in Texas, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
they,
in the
I believe, also lost all their.
Yeah, in the research that I was doing about the 488, the 112 did come up. It's somehow associated with that. It was created around the same time frame for basically the same purpose. So just so that everybody understands, there's anything that starts with a 1, like the 112th, is basically Army Guard. And then like the 488th was Army Reserve. So those numbers of the units, like all of the Air Guard units all start with 1. And like the Air Force Reserve units can be, whatever number. But they pretty much follow suit that when you see a 1 in the front, it has to do with the Guard as opposed to the Reserve.
Okay.
But it was basically the Guard version of the 488.
Okay.
The fact that all of that had to do with the military, again, is very, very disturbing.
Yeah.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, Tim, you're on mute. But
I'm on mute. I apologize. So for our JFK viewers, I was just about to bring this up because Eli brought up a really good point about Oswald. So, I always bring up every episode of our shows about how obvious things are with whether if they're trying to like really pin something on somebody. I have never in my entire life have ever seen a implicated photo of a person who basically killed a police officer and also the president of the United States, have the murder weapon on his holster, and he's holding the weapon that killed the president in his hand, right? And then he's holding a communist newspaper basically to show us all that it's available. All the evidence is right here. I mean, this reeks of like, yeah, it reeks of Alan Dulles. It reeks of like just stuff that makes us, I told you earlier in the show, I mean, that's how they view us, is like idiots. That's what they view us as.
Yes. Absolutely.
And to me, why I think it's so crazy is that, I mean, for this guy, also we talk about the 45 minutes after the assassination. I mean, they give us this big story about like how, he leaves the building after shooting the president, by the way, who is the most popular president since Lincoln. Okay. So he leaves the building, but he offers a cab to a lady because he's not in such a big hurry, okay? But then he gets into a cab and then he goes over to his boarding house. He changes clothes. He has time to talk to the cleaning lady or the rooming house lady. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go over to Beckley and I'm going to go ahead and talk to an officer. I'm going to go and kill him. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and run back to the movie house. I'm going to get some popcorn and then chill out after that. I mean, they think that we're stupid. I mean, they think that we are dumb people. They really do.
Yes.
Do. So the case of Oswald to me is basically like what you have been talking about through this whole interview about like how they think that we are just not like we don't know what, I mean, we're not here to think about anything. We don't read. That's what Alan Dole said. But also this stuff, I mean, for you, that has, you know, again, you're a colonel, you have medals. I mean, and thank you for serving our country, by the way. I respect you highly. And I mean, your degrees that you have, you've done so much research on all this. I mean, like, you're reputable. And the thing for me is that, like, how dare they call you a conspiracy theorist, like a weirdo, a wacko? It just boggles my mind.
So it is very interesting that in many of these stories, the initial story that is fielded is, in hindsight, so ridiculous. But at the time, as it's evolving through the scenarios, if you can say the ridiculous thing out loud, and then you can control the entire environment around that ridiculous thing, it sits in the history books, even though it's completely ridiculous, right? So that's kind of the method to all of this. The fact that you could look at that airplane that Mattei in Italy was blown up in and tell that it was it exploded, like with a bomb exploded, but it was deemed a mechanical failure when everybody knew that it wasn't. And that sat because you controlled everything. If a journalist started asking questions, they killed him. If a prosecutor started investigating it, they killed him. So you can allow this piece to sit hanging out here in history as a fact because you control everything around it. It's like this little crystal ball sitting on, you know, a pedestal. You're not allowed to touch it. It doesn't really exist. It's a hologram. And if I can keep everybody in the ropes away from it so no one sticks their finger through it and realizes it's a hologram, well, then it's like, you know, the Hope Diamond. But as soon as somebody gets close enough to it and actually puts their finger on it, it's like, that's not real. So you're never allowed to get close to it. And that's what I view much of our history. It's like our entire history is a hologram. It didn't exist, not the way that we were told it existed. None of it existed that way. You know, and you look at every conflict, you know that now. You know how we got into Vietnam. It was not at all like what they said. You know how Vietnam was conducted. It wasn't at all like they said it was. Korea is the same way. Did you know they had stay-behinds in South Korea? They fielded stay-behind units and basically killed all the nationalists in South Korea. They fielded stay-behind units in North Korea and staged the uprising into the excuse for the North to have attacked the South so that we could conduct Korea. There were stay-behind units in Iran in 1953. The CIA and a MAG, a military advisory group, was in South Iran setting up stay-behind units to overthrow Mossadegh in 1953. This thing is huge. And it's so huge, it's like an elephant in a room that nobody even knows or will talk about. And it's dumbfounding to me that more people are not going, what the hell? Because once you understand it and you understand the tactics used, you literally can see the same thing with the RFK assassination. Everything about that is a lie. And you have some of the same people involved in that lie.
Yeah. Well, so Colonel, my thing is that I think that we're so conditioned as people. I think we're conditioned to live our daily lives about paying our bills.
Yes.
You know, basically just living day to day and not questioning what is going on and just ignoring like these big things that are, you know, again, the murder of a president that we elected. I mean, like, we're not going to question that. And if we do, we're idiots. And then they have a guy like a Gerald Posner, who's the face of this whole thing, that basically says, you know, case closed, right? So we're not supposed to question it. And if we do, we're loony. We look into RFK's thing, you know, Sirhan allegedly, you know, he's the guy behind this whole thing. And then you have people like Laurie Spencer, who's a fucking idiot, in my opinion, that goes out there. She says that basically, like, Sirhan was the lone nut on this whole thing. I mean, like, we have to get used to things. I mean, the fact is that if we question things, we look like idiots. And I mean, you brought it up wonderfully just a few minutes ago about the fact is that we have every right to question what our reality is.
Yeah, because none of it's real. If it's coming from the
Yeah.
government, it pretty much isn't real.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, and history certainly is on our side. And the weird thing, to your point earlier about it's in black and white, but none of the stuff that we just talked about, the control of the media and all of that other stuff, hasn't actually been revealed in congressional testimony in 1975. So, I mean, and what's weird is you have a congressional body that says the CIA is assassinating people, and it never causes somebody to go, huh, the CIA guy that was fired by JFK and then runs
Yeah.
the Warren Commission,
Yeah,
and was
exactly.
his CIA that was assassinating people, huh?
Well,
Maybe there's correlation to the assassination of the
hmm
president when we're revealing that the CIA assassinates heads of state. No, nothing here.
yeah. Well, Colonel, I want your take on this. Okay, so I think what the most glaring giveaway on this whole thing is that when President Kennedy got assassinated, the early reports talked about a German Mauser, right? You had all media reports came out with about the German Mauser. It was through the board. It was basically, I mean, like everybody reported it. Okay, so but they changed it on a whim, talking about the Carcano rifle, right? So I mean, and then there were early reports from even Dan Rather, the guy who basically is Mister, manipulated himself. Like he talked about, how the shot came from the front. We have footage of this. We have footage of all this. But then when they come out with all this later on, they're like, "Oh, it was early reports. I mean, like we didn't get the full evidence in until later on." Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, like the early reports of the Oklahoma bombing saying that additional bombs were going off inside the building. Oh no, that was all false.
Yeah, yeah,
But people actually heard it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's no whatever gets reported early is not part of the narrative. So, yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've had Joe McBride on a couple times, um, and he's always harping on the fact that paying attention to the very early reports is one of the he's a journalist and author, and was one of the keys to getting a clue maybe as to what actually was happening, because you'll see in Kennedy and 9/11, all these things, some of the
Yeah.
early reports are shocking to go back and watch later,
Yes.
for 9/11 or anything, and say, oh my gosh, this was all on the news, and then think about the story we've been told for 20 years as to what happened. Well, it does get, the narrative gets pinned down, and then they all stick with it. But at the beginning, when they're all kind of out there reporting, it's probably closer to the truth.
Correct. Much closer to the truth.
So I have a question, that the strategy of tension that we've been under since the 1940s, how do where do we even go? How do you even, is this just you learn to live with it type of deal? I mean, is there any way out, right?
So I actually think President Trump is cutting all the strings right now. So let me flesh that out just a little bit for new audience. After World War II, most people don't ever even think this in this context. The entire world map changed, right? We had some changes after World War One, but after World War II, entire countries disappeared and new countries came into existence, right? Um, there was Persia, and now there's Iran. There was Mesopotamia, then there's Iraq. Pakistan just appeared out of nowhere. right? We're going to take a little bit of Afghanistan, we're going to take a little bit of India, and we're going to just make a brand new country. Taiwan didn't exist, right? It was the island of Formosa, which was part of China. And then we take a part of China with a drug kingpin Chinese general and plop him on an island called Formosa belonging to China, and all at once say, no, it's not part of China anymore. This Chinese general doesn't like the Chinese mainland, so we're going to create a whole new country called Taiwan and pretend like it's not part of China and that he's not a Chinese general dealing opium all over the world, right? So brand new country. Well, what other country got created after World War II? Israel. Now, if you go in the world, all over the world, where's the strategy of tensions every time something happens? Oh, I don't know. Israel, Taiwan, Pakistan, Iran, all of these fake countries after World War II were stood up in order to keep us in perpetual war. We divided Korea on purpose. It gives us perpetual war. We divided Vietnam. We signed a document that said that there was going to be an election in Korea after World War I. It had been a Japanese colony for like 25 or 35 years. And they had been basically held prisoner there. We're all about democracy and freedom. Did we give them freedom and democracy? Hell no. We start planning stay behind units because we didn't like who they were going to elect president. And then we just basically decide to divide it, leave it divided, and it's divided today. So we created that choke point right there. We did the exact same thing in Vietnam. Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh was not a communist. He wanted, as a matter of fact, the OSS detachment that was assigned to Ho Chi Minh during World War II, they went back several years repeatedly to visit him. They became so attached to him. He came to Paris with a drafted constitution modeled off of our constitution to get rid of the French and allow Vietnam to not be a French colony. Well, do you know who said no? We said no. No French is coming back in. And Ho Chi Minh basically said, over my dead body are they coming back in. We will fight you till we die. We are not going to be a colony anymore. And he fought until they died. And so if you look at all of these perpetual wars all over the world, this is basically the very definition of strategy of tension, right? We create this so that we can, and so many things in America changed as a result of these operations. And so if you look around the world, if I can control the strategic resources in the Middle East by setting up a fake, and I say fake, a new country called Israel, and I give it all this shrouded, it's all about the Jewish people and all this other stuff. The state of Israel is a secular state that was set up by Balfour and the Rothschilds. There's nothing special about Israel. It was a country that was carved out of the Middle East to plop down a bunch of, at the time, the what's the name of those guys? They were terrorists. The Haganahs, the original Jewish people there, because they were part of the British occupation forces that were attacking the Muslims and the Christians there. It's founded on terrorism. That was the whole basis of that. They have the Jerusalem Mafia, that was supposedly the Islamic scholar that was there, that basically the British bought and pretended like he was some big, sage Muslim leader. He wasn't. He was a stooge of the British. The British created the Muslim Brotherhood in the 1920s in Egypt. Every terrorist group around the world has been created by these people. We created the Mujahideen in the 80s that morphs into ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And, you just found out it's a front page news that Bibi Netanyahu was funding Hamas. Hamas was created to, as a strategy of tension against the PLO. You will find out that every single terrorist organization is controlled by intelligence operations. That's the whole purpose of them. So that if I need to conflict somebody or I need somebody taken out, I just say, hey, oh my gosh, look, that terrorist thing happened.
So, Colonel, what do you say to the people that are out there that say that John F. Kennedy was assassinated by Israel and Israel first? I think for me, I think you have to have a little bit more of a layer or level of understanding about this whole thing. It can't, for me, the fact that Israel is like runs everything that United States goes through, or that runs, when it comes to a murderer president, I talk to people that believe in, like, Lyndon Johnson was a guy that helped orchestrate the assassination, and they say he had enough power to do it. People talk about Israel. To me, these again seem to be red herrings, because the fact is the big picture is like you mentioned earlier, is that they were created by some sort of entity itself.
The high table. Yeah, they're created to have this strategy of tension for forever wars. They get rich off of war. They love killing people. They're satanic assholes. And so if you can perpetuate war, that terrorizes people. It keeps people under control, and you can control everything. And you steal their resources by funding the intelligence and the military complex. And you give the sainted knighthood to your military so that no one can question anything that they do. So you have all of the foundation set to perpetuate this machine. So for people that claim that Israel did it, my question is, who was the assassin? I've given you an assassin that has absolutely nothing to do with Israel. I can tie an assassin to that site that day that's directly part of Operation Gladio under the control of NATO, Lyman Lemnitzer, who was fired by JFK and best friends with Allen Dulles. I can make that whole chain work. You tell me who the assassin was that the Mossad hired and had in Dallas that day. Can you tell me any? No, you can't. So you can't make a claim that Mossad is the one that was responsible for JFK's assassination until you can find me an assassin that was in Dallas that day and tell me what his connection to Mossad is. You can't. It doesn't exist. Now, having said that, I want to make it perfectly clear that these intelligence agencies do not operate independent of each other. It's like having a brother. MI6 is the dad. They were all born after World War II in very close proximity. The KCIA for Korea, the BND for Germany under the leadership of Reinhard Gehlen, the CIA, Mossad, but they're siblings. Did you ever fight with your siblings? Yes, we all did. Do we get along with our siblings as well? Yes, we do. Do we help them when it comes to family like the mafia? Absolutely, we do. And that's the reason why you had the Jewish and Italian mafia cooperating together on all of the narcotic arrangements in the United States. They would go on vacation in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and Cuba, and it was like a everybody's fine here. It was like a what do you call it, a guns free zone or something like that, where they all partied together and then they went back and killed each other. So intelligence agencies around the world, you very rarely find in any of these operations where only one was operating. Like when we overthrow Iran, MI6 tried to overthrow Mossadegh and did such a poor job, they got kicked out of the country. Their entire embassy was closed. They got expelled from the country. So what did they do? They call up Allen Dulles and said, hey, we'll cut you in on the Anglo-Iranian oil deal and give Standard Oil 35% that Mossadegh wanted. So we're only going to get 50%. But if you can get the CIA in there to overthrow him so we can get back in, we'll cut Standard Oil in. So Allen Dulles went and overthrew the prime minister of Iran so Standard Oil could get a cut of that oil deal. Not for us, not for the people that were paying his salary, but for Standard Oil to get cut in on that oil deal. Same thing in Guatemala the year after that. In 1954, United Fruit was getting kicked out of the country because why? Because they owned basically all of the arable farmland in Guatemala, and the people wanted their land back. You know, kind of like we don't want China owning our farmland. Well, other people don't like other countries owning their farmland either. And so they're like, yeah, and they didn't even want all of the land. They wanted the land that United Fruit wasn't using. They were only using a very small segment, and they had gotten the rest of it through corrupt land deals by paying off the leadership in Guatemala. Okay, so a new president comes in, and they're like, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And oh, by the way, we'll pay you the value of that land that you've been paying taxes on. And United Fruit goes, oh, well, that's only $1 million. No, it's really worth 20 million. And then they're like, well, why weren't you paying taxes on 20 million if that's the value of the land? Oh, never mind. And they just pick up the phone and call Alan Dulles and said, hey, get rid of this guy. He's being a pain in the ass. And so we go down there and we get rid of him. The same thing happened in Chile. It happened in the Congo. And there's over 90 of them that actually worked. There's hundreds of them that didn't work, like Cuba. So once you understand that this is all a play for resources and control, that's what it's all about. They want to own everything, and they want us to be slaves. It all makes sense. And JFK was instrumental in disrupting that machine. He was not going to go along with that you're going to own everything and they're going to own nothing scenario. He wanted everybody to prosper and live in peace. And he was killed for
it. Eli, go ahead and take this because I mean, like, I got something else for after your question. I mean, like, go ahead, go.
I don't have a question. I think that was very well said and aligns with, my reading of the assassination in the history of the 1950s and 60s, and this overlay and this,
I mean,
for Gladio. Is awesome.
Yeah. So what do you say to people out there that still believe in this hogwash about like how we live in this society? I mean, like there's been something clearly wrong, I mean, I'm 46, right? So, I mean, like I've known that we live in a society where we have to depend on like, the internet age, and now we're in the AI age and what have you. But I mean, we're confused. All of us are confused. I mean, because we don't even know what the truth is. I mean, the history books. I mean, like when my grandfather, he told me when I was in third grade, when I was learning about the Kennedy assassination, he said, hey, and he was a Navy vet. I mean, like he was a well-respected Navy vet. He said, son, I love you, but you cannot rely on these history books. And I remember being that young and, absorbing that. And I finally I understood what he meant by it, because the fact is that, if you look at it from like the Kennedy assassination, about like how Kennedy was killed with an open top, limousine, and then his accused assassin gets murdered 2 days afterwards. And then yet we're supposed to dismiss that and just let it go. I mean, this is our history books. I mean, like I look right now, Colonel, I look at the Alamo. That's another thing too. The Alamo is supposed to be about these heroes in Texas that were supposed to be celebrated by like fending off these, thousands of, Mexican people. We don't know the other side of that. Okay. There's so many elements of history that we don't know. Whether it be, we were brainwashed to learning that Colonel Custer, Custer, right? He was supposed to be this massive hero, but he was this guy that was not a hero. I mean, like, there's so many different elements about history that we look at and go, okay, yeah, we were brainwashed on this.
Yeah. So that to me is kind of my mission, is going back and relearning history, looking at outside the approved resource. So one of the problems in the military in general is you're indoctrinated. You're not educated, you're indoctrinated. Here's the history, the approved history that we've screened. This is what you're allowed to know, and this is your military history. It has actually no bearing on the actual military history. There may be a few things that are, true in there, but it is not the history. It's a history. It's not the history. And that's what I find the most amazing. And I've just made it my life journey since I stumbled across this. In the past, to your point, did 9/11 look hokey? Yeah. Did, other things about history look hokey? Yeah. Did JFK thing look hokey? Yeah. But I didn't have anything to base that on. It just looked weird, right? But once you understand Operation Gladio and you clearly see this international syndicate pulling strings on everything, and it's literally pattern after pattern after pattern of it all being about resource. It's all about oil. It's about uranium. It's about copper. And it's concrete things. It's not this, it looks hokey thing anymore. It's real, factual evidence that the Chilean coup was orchestrated by Freeport, Anaconda Mining, ITT, and PepsiCo. They all approached Richard Nixon and offered to pay him to get rid of Salvador Allende, and the CIA killed him. There's concrete evidence of all of that. And so now it's not this, oh, that looks weird. It's not that at all now. Now that you understand the play and you understand the motivation behind it and you understand the tools they use to do it, you will never look at anything the same again. And all of these events that are happening right now, you have to ask questions, because whatever you're being told, especially by the mainstream media, is bold-faced lies. You cannot trust anything. But to the point that you made earlier about how does this all end up? So as I was saying, I think every day that goes by, more and more about Israel being used as a strategy of tension with their use of Hamas. That just recently came out, right? That he was sending $35 million to Hamas through Qatar. And you have the Irans, the Ayatollah was not anything that people think it was. That's being dealt with. Venezuela, that's been completely changed as well. So you start snipping at all of the strings, and I believe that's what we're seeing. There's a few more to fall. Turkey's a big question. Turkey is set on every side of the fence. Turkey is part of Operation Gladio. Erdogan, he can go either way. There's been some very good things that he's did, and he's done some very nefarious things. And so there's a couple of other hot spots. We're going to have to deal with the City of London. That entire apparatus is completely rotten. But we can't actually do a lot here inside the United States until the foreign threat is gone. I talked about all of these stay-behind units in the United States. So I think that's what opening the border was all about, is pre-positioning resources here in case they needed to control us in the future. And I think these ICE raids, if you overlay them with known narco trafficking that had been controlled by the CIA, they perfectly match. You have, Memphis, you have Charlotte, you have Washington, D.C., you have Chicago, you have New York, you have LA, all big hotspots on these networks. And I think all of these people being round up is much more nefarious than what most people realize. And they're being deported. And those things have to happen before you can actually get into the real meat of disclosing because you're going to find out about how corrupt the elections are. And you had this entire narrative being ran about, oh, our Smartmatic was ran by Venezuela. Smartmatic was not ran by Venezuela. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Were expats, Venezuelan people, brought into the United States and set up in Miami to create a proprietary organization called Smartmatic and pretend like it's theirs? Yes, they were. Has the CIA been controlling our elections? Yes. But they've been controlling elections since 1948. The very first election that the CIA interfered with was in 1948. They spent $35 million to sway the election in Italy towards NATO and away from an independent Italy. So they have interfered in every election of consequence since 1948. And you think that the CIA is going to allow a foreign country to manipulate our elections without them? Hell no. Would they use expats from a foreign country to control our elections? Hell yes. So, but that whole narrative was put out there by CIA agents. Literal CIA guy going on interviews on Laura Logan saying, yeah, it's Venezuela. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm literally pulling my hair out. And I'm like, I like Laura Logan, but I was like, you cannot possibly believe that.
Yeah.
But she did.
So, I mean, like, for me, I mean, like, again, I know the show is like Kennedy, like assassination centric, and we're branching out. And by the way, Colonel, thank you so much for being on our show. I think for me, when it comes to the assassination itself, I mean, like, you get a bunch of gibberish when it comes to like different people who play their parts to really, I mean, so what was even the basis of releasing the Zapruder film? I mean, like, for me, you have the guy who's responsible, which is Robert Groden, and thank you. That I'm very grateful that he was able to get this out via Dick Gregory. But I look at this and they put it out on the Geraldo show or whatever it was. It was like Good Night America, right? So they put this out there. They have the public see this, but again, it's another like, a fake thing going on. Because I mean, like, if you look at the Nix film, okay, and we've talked about this on this show before, the Nix film actually counters that film but the Zapruder film, okay? So like in the Nix film, you see like the slowdown of the vehicle. Like literally, like it almost comes to a complete stop, okay? And I mean that completely counters like the slow moving thing about like the Zapruder film that just keeps going on and on and on and on and on, and then all of a sudden it goes in towards the Stemmons Freeway. I mean, like, there's all aspects of this thing that really makes people actually question their own reality.
And maybe that's the purpose of it. But do you remember where the Zapruder film was kept?
Yeah, it wasn't over at the Life catalog, right?
The Time Life. Yeah. And you know that Henry Luce and Claire Luce, do you know where Claire Luce was the ambassador?
Go ahead.
Italy.
Yeah, and she had met, allegedly there was I guess William Harvey was sleeping with Mrs. Luce as well. So I mean, like, we have like,
did we not just come full circle?
Yeah, full circle.
Oh, hey, you need a place to hide that JFK film? Let's just put it in our safe in here, because I know all about Gladio. I know all about them sending assassins, because she was the ambassador in Italy, home of Operation Gladio, home of William Harvey. So it all just comes full circle.
Yeah.
Right? You have this small group of people that keep showing up in the story repeatedly.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. I mean, like, again, we talk about questioning our own reality. I mean, like, I talk about this, about like any like JFK people that are out there that talk about James Files and all these other things. I mean, like, for me, it's really basic. I mean, like, you have to take a step back and you have to actually, learn. I mean, for me, it's always been about like what you, Colonel, I mean, like, I respect you so much because your thesis on this is like what I see. Because basically, it's always been about like the shadow government and these people that have operated this thing. I mean, like, the point of our whole show is basically the background of like who created this whole thing with the assassination. It really is. I mean, if we follow your work about what you've talked about through, like, pre the assassination, World War II, I mean, like, you nail it. You nail this whole thing. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, like, I think you are the person who has really done a hell of a job. I mean, whereas the community always like really revolves around the fact that James Files did this or the Israel did this, LBJ did this. I mean, you bring up a really good explanation about like it's always been in the background. I mean, what your work has been really impressive.
Thank you. And I think that's the reason why it's been hidden. There's a reason why all of this stuff is never been printed about in the United States. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you heard this past summer, I went back to Air War College because I was pissed off. I mean, I spent a year there getting a master's degree, Montgomery, Alabama. And I went to the library there and I wanted to know what they had on file that related to Operation Gladio. I had my list of books, nothing, not a single book. It's the Air Force's largest library. It houses all of our professional military and residence education. As a matter of fact, there was one periodical, I have it right here because I keep it handy. One, and you're going to love it, one periodical magazine that was on file. The lady had to go get it, and I made a Xerox copy. There was a article in a magazine called Defense and Diplomacy. And I don't know what the date of this was, but it was like in the, may have been like in the 70s. Okay, so in the heart of Operation Gladio. There was an article, let's say in the, it's a every 2-month magazine. Let's say it was written in April. And for those of you who don't know, when they do these types of magazines, they'll have stuff like 6 months out, right? So if you release something in April, there's no way you're going to get a response to that April article in the June magazine. No way. Because the June magazine was done like in January, right? As far as articles and stuff like that. So in April, there was an article written about Operation Gladio. It was very high level. Hey, there may have been this thing. Oh, that's right. No, it had to have been in 92 because it had came out in 90 in Italy. Hey, there's this thing. It may have been a thing. It's not really a thing, but maybe. And it got talked about by Prime Minister Andreotti, kinda, but, whatever. The very next edition, this article, Debunking Gladio. Do you see the name who wrote it?
Ted Shackley?
Yes. The very next article. And he goes on to tell you that the guy who wrote the original article was full of shit. He didn't know anything about what he was talking about. Nothing. And oh, by the way, every bit of this was documented in the Italian press and in the court that investigated and the prosecutor who prosecuted the people that were involved in Operation Gladio. That's the only two things in the entire library. And I mean, it's like it'd be like the city library in New York. It's a big library. The only two things that mention Operation Gladio in the entire library of a military service in the United States that we participated in.
Which lines up with like Danny Sheehan's, if you look at Danny Sheehan's like whole like conferences about in his classes. He has a massive theology about Theodore Shackley going from post-Kennedy assassination about the opiates going into the United States, which is crazy because this guy is a definition of plausible deniability. I mean, like, Theodore Shackley is just the devil, just like Alan Dulles was.
Well, the CIA has ran every narcotic network since post-World War II.
Yeah.
And there's definitely lots of information to prove that. And I've read book after book after book about it. They were responsible for the Golden Triangle, the Golden Crescent, and the Crystal Triangle in Latin America. Every bit of it.
And I say that they're responsible for the Kennedy assassination as well.
100%.
So I mean, I for a lot of people that are out there, again, that continue to look at the outliers about this, I mean, like, it's not really far. I mean, you have to look into this when it comes to just what the evidence lays out there. But I mean, Colonel, we're going to wrap up here in a second, but I want to tell you that, I mean, I just put a post out there on X that you're probably my most favorite interview that I've done in over 40 shows. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like, this is my favorite interview I've done. I mean, you are so knowledgeable, so good, and I'm just impressed. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. And I just want to reiterate, when we talk about the CIA, you have to understand that the CIA is the Praetorian Guard. I mean, the assassin that we have on station is an OAS assassin in a sister intelligence capability, part of this Gladio network. And so that they don't operate in the United States without the acquiescence of the CIA, right? So they're not going to send foreign assassins into, like, and they do that for plausible deniability. So if that French guy ever got caught, they can go, what the hell? Why is French trying to kill our president? Right? So it's very important to use foreigners. And that's why they love the Cuban exiles, because they could blame Castro because they're Cuban. Well, they haven't lived in Cuba since 1958, but that's just beside the point. They look Cuban, so we can pass them off as Cuban. That was what Operation Northwood was all about. Let them kill up and blow up people in the United States, and we'll just blame Castro. And if they get killed, we don't care. They literally don't care. And so you just see these things play out over and over again. And there was a network that set that entire thing up. It was orchestrated with a lot of different moving pieces, and the only organization that could do that, to include the New Mexico station chief, all of these different moving parts, right? The CIA first coming in contact with Oswald being in Japan, his whole movement in and out of Russia. The only organization that could have orchestrated all of that is the CIA. And so if you don't understand all of those different pieces, and then you understand how the CIA works with all the sister intelligence organizations, and you understand Gladio, and the fact that this pattern has repeated itself repeatedly, right? We've knocked off a hell of a lot of heads of state. So it is not outside the stretch of the imagination that we would take out one of our own. I mean, these same Cuban exiles were responsible for Watergate. So they cooed Richard Nixon, and you can't get around that either. So the pattern's set, the players are known, and anybody out there that wants to say someone else was behind it, you need to find me an assassin. I presented mine, now you give me yours.
Yes. So, Colonel, with every show, and by the way, if you want to follow the Colonel, you can actually follow her on at Colonel Towner on X, and also the Colonel's Corner on Substack. You can go on there as well. So with every show, what we usually do when we end our show, we do final takes. We have the guest give the final take of the show, and Eli and I give our takes before you. So So my take for the show with you is that this has been incredible. I said on X that this is my favorite interview that I've done so far, because of the fact that how fluent you are, like how. I mean, we've had Joe McBride on before, who I love as well, but I mean, like, you have been just absolutely incredible about like your level of like knowledge and about how you've been able to display and connect the dots. And I'm just so very grateful that you wanted to join our show tonight and just really share your information. And please do, again, follow her again if you haven't on X at, again, Colonel Tower. And that's my take there. Eli, what do you got?
Yeah, this has been fantastic, especially, you know, we generally focus pretty specifically on the JFK assassination. So to be able to fit that into a larger historical framework has been very enlightening, and I think everyone's going to really enjoy it. One question I had was all the books that you've read, you know, do you have anywhere that you list the, you know, your favorites or the ones that you highly recommend for folks, you know, who want to dig more into it?
So I need to do a whole list of them. I do not have that. The two required reading is Operation Gladio by Paul Williams and Danielle Ganser's NATO Secret Army. Those are the two first books that form the foundation. They were the two first books that I read. And the other one that I highly recommend, once you understand what Gladio is, which you will by the end of those two books, this book right here called Killing Hope by William Bloom. He basically takes you from, I mean, very early, like the Hawaiian, because this didn't just start after World War II. They were doing it before, they just didn't have the central intelligence and the standing military. So they kind of did it ad hoc. And he gives you like how he stole Hawaii from the Queen, because we overthrew the Queen in Hawaii. And he goes through country by country, time period wise, of all of the coups. You know, so it is, he goes, you know, he starts basically in the 1940s and forward. He talks about some of the pre things, but primarily post World War II. So then if you understand how Gladio works and then you go back and you read his, he doesn't talk about Gladio in here at all, but you see it once you know what it is. Yeah, and that's the beauty of understanding what Operation Gladio is. So most people don't call it by that, but they will. Like we were reading A Safe for Democracy, and John Prado doesn't ever say it, Operation Gladio. He talks about stay behind units though. And you're going to be surprised at how often in these books they talk about these stay behind units, but we never knew what they were. And so I do need to get a list together, and it is on my to-do list. But I just want to thank you guys. I did not come into this doing JFK research. I came into this as a military project to find out what the hell Operation Gladio was and why they didn't tell me about it. And what I found is starting in 1945, that this nefarious activity literally touched every aspect of all of our lives. You know, it's everywhere. It does all of these different things. The Vietnam War, 9/11. You know, we didn't even go into that. That basically was an Operation Gladio terrorist attack in the United States. So you just now, once you understand what it is, you see the fingerprints everywhere. And that's truly why I believe they don't want us knowing anything about it, because you can't fool somebody once they are wearing Gladio glasses. They will literally see everything in real time that's happening.
Infernal. I mean, like again, it's been like amazing to have you on our show. And again, we hope to have you on for a part two with this, because I mean, you are so knowledgeable about this, and we'd love to have you back on again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, like we say with every episode, the truth is out there. We'll see you guys for episode 40. You guys have a good night. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a good night.